Hi, welcome to Changing Minds. I'm your host, Emmanuel Mayhew. Companies and banks increasingly adopt insights from behavioral science and neuroscience. There's a wealth of research available for organizations to apply, but we often don't know how it's applied. For this reason, we thought it would be interesting to hear from someone who deals with the implementation and usage of neuroscience and behavioral science research. With me to discuss this today is Luigi Ruggerone, the head of Innovation, Research and Development at Intesa San Paolo's Innovation Center. Intesa San Paolo is Italy's largest bank. Luigi has an economics and banking background and has worked in academia and at the IMF, on top of his long experience at the bank. Welcome to Changing Minds, Luigi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Emmanuel. Good morning, everyone. And thanks very much for inviting me over for this interesting and challenging dialogue.
Thank you. So, first of all, I once came across an article on your partnership with the Museo del Cenacolo Vinciano of Milan, which has masterpieces such as Da Vinci's Last Supper in it. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that partnership consisted in?
Absolutely. Let me share my screen for a
Sure.
few minutes and see, if we can walk everyone through this really exciting experience. I hope you can see my screen right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, basically, this was a very interesting applied research, a challenge. We like to call them challenges. Basically, what happened is that the director of the museum, which is it's called museum, but it only consists of two paintings of two
Okay.
frescoes, one in front of the other. So it's not really a very rich museum, rich in terms of number of paintings, but it's obviously very rich, for the quality and the importance of Leonardo's Last Supper. The museum approached us saying that they were not terribly happy, or they thought they were not terribly happy with the experience that visitors were having while visiting the Last Supper,
Okay.
and they thought they might improve the quality of the exposition, and they might improve the involvement of the visitors.
Mhm.
So they asked us whether we could help them, and obviously we said yes, because we strongly believe that there is a very tight relationship between obviously arts and emotions, and therefore arts and human beings, arts
Mhm.
and human brain and emotions. And the analysis and the exploration of emotions, of human being emotions in various instances of our existence, is at the heart of the neuroscience. So is really the bread and butter of
Mhm.
of the neuroscience lab that we have established 3 years ago at the Innovation Center of Intesa San Paolo. So we accepted the challenge, and we started this research, this cooperation with Cenacolo Vinciano, and basically what we did, we selected two different groups of visitors,
Mhm.
experts and non-experts, and we carried out a research in two different instances, in 2 different days. One day when the museum was closed, and the other one when the museum was open. So it was open to public. So in some cases, the visitors were the actually each visitor was the only person in front of the fresco. In some other cases of the research, the people participating in the research were actually among many other visitors. So we wanted to verify and see whether there were differences in the experience and the emotions that the paintings were inducing in the visitors. It's interesting also to remind and to mention what kind of devices we used. We basically used three devices on each visitor that was participating in the research. We basically used the eye trackers.
Okay.
So in order to analyze, in order to record, heat maps to verify whether whether people and visitors were looking at certain parts of the painting and how long they would remain with their eyes and with their sight, focusing on concentrating on this or that other particular part of the painting. One was the EEG. The EEG is basically, you know, a sort of helmet that helps us measuring the motivation index of people. So the level of pleasantness that people were experiencing while facing and while looking at the painting and or the paintings, because in fact, like I said, there are two paintings in this museum. And then finally, we also used a bracelet that measures the galvanic skin response. So in somehow it measures the arousal, the emotional involvement of people. So in one case, the EEG, you know, measures basically the level of activity of electric activity in some parts of our brain, while the galvanic skin response basically measures how emotionally involved we are by measuring, you know, the perspiration, the heartbeat, and so on and so forth. So let me walk you through our findings.
Yeah, what does this show?
Sure, go ahead, please. Yeah.
No. I'm curious to know what this shows.
All right. Okay. So this is a slide that presents you know, the results of the eye tracking measurement. And as you can see, so the panel A reports the how long and where the eyes, how long for the eyes of the visitors would focus on certain parts of the painting. And as you can see, they were focusing mainly, of course, on Jesus and some of the other you know, of the other figures in the painting. But most of all, they were focusing a lot. If you see here under the painting, under the fresco, they were focusing a lot on the information material that is written underneath. This means that probably a lot of people were, you know, were taking a long time in reading rather than observing the painting itself. So they were actually reading what the painting is about, reading about the various figures, you know, St. Thomas, St. Peter, Judas, and so on and so forth, rather than actually looking at them and experiencing, you know, the beauty and experiencing the visual experience of Leonardo's painting. When it comes to observing the closed museum, the difference is not striking. Visitors were still focusing very much on the information content, but they were actually insisting more and focusing more and spending more time with their eyes, looking at the various parts of the painting. So obviously, when the museum was closed, obviously, you know, there was much more involvement and there was more time, and it was easier to focus the attention and to focus, you know, your sight on the painting. It's interesting to notice that also basically the major elements of interest are above the table. So people were looking what was happening among the people, among Jesus and the other participants in the Last Supper. They were not really looking what was happening underneath or above them, which is in a way a pity, because the perspective of this fresco, of this painting, is very interesting. So apparently people were not really looking at the perspective, but they were looking at the figures themselves. So in a way, they were missing out on some interesting parts of this Leonardo's painting. What emerges here also is that by considering and by verifying that nobody was actually looking above the painting, you know, here where you have this, you know, this semicircular parts of the painting, nobody was actually looking at them. And actually, they are an integral. Under no circumstances, neither when the museum was open nor when it was closed, so nobody was actually looking at them. which is a real pity because these are an integral part of the painting. And experts told us that they're actually, very important. They are worth looking at with a lot of attention, and nobody was actually looking at them. So one of the messages that the museum got from this was that they were probably they probably need to change the light, the illumination of the painting. They gathered from this figure, from this data, from this evidence, from this empirical evidence. The museum gathered the impression that they need to change the way they illuminate and the way they shed light on the painting. Probably and possibly those upper parts of the painting are not adequately illuminated, so they probably need to do something about that. So this is one way in which we science and research in a way had an impact and induced the museum to at least raise an issue and probably try to solve it by changing the illumination.
Did the museum use your findings also for the explanations?
Well, I do not know honestly, because I do not have access to the internal documents of the museum. But I presume so. Every time you want to change something, you must ground, your decision on your proposal. So I presume so, but I'm not certain about it.
Sure.
Through the eye tracking device, we also measured, the various area of interest. So this is basically a sequence of so the order by which people were looking at the painting. So obviously, people were starting from the very center of the painting. So they were first looking at Jesus, and the time people on average spend looking and focusing and concentrating their sights on Jesus is actually very long, because it's above 16 seconds. So for more than 16 seconds, people were looking at the face of Jesus, at his hands, at his dress, his facial expression. So 16 seconds is really is really quite a long time. It doesn't sound long, but it is long. Then it's interesting because in general visitors jump from left to right almost on a regular basis. You see, number 2, Giovanni or John, is on the left hand side, and then they move to Thomas, number 3. Then they remain on that side of the painting with number 4, and then they jump all the way down to the left hand side of the painting. So this is interesting. This is interesting because it makes us understand that visitors spend quite a while on each of the figures, but with apparently not a very not in an ordinate way. So they jump from character to character in a way. It's interesting. It's interesting to see that a lot of people. So the longest time spent looking at a figure that's not Jesus was spent by looking at the figure of Thomas, at the car. Thomas is very interesting because Thomas is one of the disciples of Jesus that he was famous, or I dare say notorious, for being one who was hard to convince. It was hard to make him believe things. So he was always doubtful. He always had to experience things on his skin. So he had to feel things. He had to live things in order to believe in them.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that probably people were bringing with them this knowledge that they have of Thomas, and they wanted to see how Leonardo represented Thomas, how Leonardo painted the expression of Thomas. So that's interesting that the second highest time spent looking at the painting is spent on Thomas, which is very, very interesting. Here we also, again, we have a measure of the heat map of where and how long experts look at parts of the painting and non-experts. Obviously, the X panel is for experts, the Y panel is for non-experts, and obviously you can see here that experts tend to look at more details, tend to have a broader a broader view, and tend to look at the painting more broadly than non-experts, which is obviously it's an unsurprising result. I mean, it's quite obvious. It's quite obvious.
That's really interesting. So the experts saw a lot more things.
Exactly, span through. Yeah, exactly, span through the.
Okay.
Um,
May I ask, as I'm aware, time is flying,
yeah.
what were the takeaways you took from this research?
The takeaways that we took from this research basically are that it's very interesting to explore what happens to emotions when people are looking at art. This is very, very interesting. Art is really something that uh, touches touches us as human beings in our depth. So it deeply touches us, which is very interesting. So this is a scientific sort of demonstration, a scientific proof that art is something that really is able to really touch the deepest chords in our emotions, and in our brain, in our senses. And it's also another important takeaway is that we believe that this kind of analysis can give back to managers. In this case, the manager of the museum can give back very sound and important pieces of information that can actually help them in doing their job, in making the experience that visitors have a better experience, an even more involving experience. So these are the major takeaways that we had from this research.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've never heard of an analysis like this being done in a museum, not even in the
Yeah.
most known.
Yeah, but me neither. But I mean, I'm not really a close follower of literature, but certainly this was a great experience, and I can tell you. So if you want to stay tuned,
Mhm.
that we are preparing a similar research on another very, very important piece of art in Italy. I cannot disclose what it
Oh.
is. It's not a painting anymore. It's a statue, which is it's even probably more involving, because it's a three-dimension object. So you can look at it from different perspectives. You can walk around it. So stay tuned, and maybe in a few months we will be able to reconvene here and have a chat on a similar research, but on a statue and not a painting.
Definitely. Well, you're leaving us guessing now as to what that statue is. I'm quite curious to find out. But that's really fascinating how this research basically informed how EEG and eye tracking informed the museum's policy also as to how to improve the visitor experience. Do you have any? So this is applying the research to an external partner, the Museo Vinciano. Can you tell us about an occasion where you used the methodologies and findings of the Research and Innovation Center to solve some of the bank's internal challenges rather than those of external partners?
Sure. Yeah, that's also thanks, Emmanuel. This is a very interesting question, also because we receive for these researchers a lot of funding from our parent company, which is a bank. So we have to give back to our to one of our major stakeholders. So we do a lot of works, obviously, also for the parent company, for the bank, for the banking group. I would mention an experience that we had with an online branch. Obviously that banks are less and less physical, so there are less and less people or less crowd going physically to our branches, and most of them use either their smartphone to interact with the bank, so to move money from one account to the other, to make payments and so on and so forth. And some other people use telephone lines. So it's what we call the online banking. So the online and telephone banking. So it's an online branch. Basically, you pick up the phone,
Mhm.
you call on the operator, and he or she tries to help you in solving your issue while you are in front of your computer. And sometimes they also try to sell you stuff. We are a very big group, so not only do we sell banking services, but we also sell insurance contracts, for example. So together with the online branch, we ran a research, we ran an experiment in which we tried to select those words and those expressions that were more engaging for clients, that were more inducive into clients the willingness to listen to the telephone operator, and perhaps even to buy, or at least to listen to the description of the contract that was being offered.
Okay.
This was very interesting, and I'm afraid it's in Italian,
That's
it's not very important. Actually, the understanding of the single words. What's important is the hang on. What's important is the actually the content. So I think you can see my screen by now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's a little bit small,
Yeah,
but yeah, we can see it.
yeah, yeah. Well, basically, these are examples of sentences. The green ones, just ignore the central column,
Mutual.
yeah, just focus on the left hand side and the right hand side. So there's
Mhm.
a green column and a red column. Obviously, colors are speaking for themselves. Green is a green light. Green is a go. Green is a word or an expression that engages, that feels, that makes the client feel keener to listen to the proposal.
Okay.
The red sentence is obviously something that makes you lose lose the
Fine.
client almost immediately. So what we have done, we have recorded and registered the level of involvement depending upon the sentence and the words that were used by the telephone operator, and we gave back to the director of the online branches. We gave her back a list of sentences that we believe are more engaging, and they prepared a sort of guideline in which they were encouraging telephone operator to use some sentences rather than others.
Okay.
Obviously, provided that they wanted to sell the product, but that's that's the that's the basic prior. So this is something that we have done for the bank, and we're very happy, and we're very happy to see that in fact it was actually used empirically. It was used in a day in day out business operations. So we feel that with the neuroscience, we helped our colleagues to do their job in a better
Mhm.
way.
That's really good. Okay, so you basically tested different conditions of sentences empirically and retained the ones that were most successful in winning you new clients.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Huh, cool. No, that's a really great application.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in fact, I saw that your research center also does machine learning and works also on artificial intelligence. One of the things that I just had a quick view of is a project that you mentioned in a previous talk, in which you're saying that Intesa San Paolo's Innovation Center has a machine learning project through which it's trying to understand a movie audience's preferences. I was wondering what that project consisted in.
Yes, this project, it's still at its initial stages, and by initial stages I mean, well, first of all, let me be clear on the fact that our projects, especially the artificial intelligence ones, they last for an average of 11 or 12 months. So on average, we're talking about at least, give or take 1 year, 1 year period. So these are quite long researches. In this very instance, we are still at the initial stage in which we are still trying to understand what is the most promising path that we might follow. So we're still in the selection process of stream of research that we really want to follow, that we really want to explore. The basic aim of this research is to try and understand what are the topics that on which people are, about which people are talking on social media. So what are the topics that that are more involving for the public in general, or for some parts of the public which are indicated by our clients. So maybe you are interested in getting to know what my 17-year-old son is talking about with his friends. So so you make a selection of it's all public information. I want to be clear also on that. We're not intruding in anybody's privacy, or we're not grasping any information, information on privacy. So we do that. We try to select the topics which are of major interest, and we try to teach the machine through machine learning approaches, machine learning devices, to try and teach the machine to create and generate either journal articles, either newspaper articles that focus on that topic, or plots that can be used to create documentaries or even movies around these topics.
Plots as in narrative plots, right?
Yes, exactly. So the idea is to start from social media, understand what are the main topics going around in the social media, and try to teach the machine to extrapolate in a way, or to generate from these topics either lyrics for songs, or articles, or plots for documentaries or movies, which is very difficult.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because the ability of artistic creation or of imagining stories seemed like something uniquely human up to now.
Exactly. That's what you're saying is very important. In fact, the first preliminary evidence seems to suggest that it's not entirely possible to leave this only and entirely to the machine. So there has to be at some point some human intervention, which in a way is good, I think, because I would feel very, in a way, frustrated or depressed if I were able to generate a machine, or to teach a machine how to generate texts automatically without having somebody with hands, eyes, brain, nose, writing it, or at least contributing to it. So in a way, I think this is refreshing. But on the other hand, is very interesting and very challenging. So, but to be honest with you, we're still at the initial stages. So we have some encouraging results in terms of generating at least newspaper articles. But we're still quite far away from being able to generate full-fledged plots for documentaries, or even movies or sitting, so or sit comedies. So we'll see.
Whoa, but that's really amazing. And so basically creating text, creating stories, and going back to the other projects you described, the Research and Innovation Center of Intesa San Paolo seems to have a really broad array of research interests and applications, going from the emotional reaction to art, the user experience in museums, and testing conditions with customers, seeing what works best, and then creating narratives. It's surprising because the bank is a very large group,
Yeah.
but at the same time, for some of these things, the connection with banking is not immediate. Although I suppose that doing research, doing all sorts of research, then gives you an advantage maybe on the long run, because people might not see the connection to banking, but it might appear one day.
Absolutely, you're totally right, Emmanuel. You actually put your finger right on it. Obviously, we we are very keen to contribute with positive impacts on on our clients, on our fellow citizens in Italy and Europe. But obviously we are not entirely philanthropists, right? So we do that also for business purposes. So yes, what we feel we are doing, and actually what the intuition of the CEO was when he created the innovation center, was precisely to invest in innovation, to explore the frontier, and perhaps try to move it ahead, to move it forward, and giving back what we learn to the bank and also to our clients. So it's a sort of investment, and we try to open our clients to innovation, to new techniques, like like this technique of choosing the right words when you want to sell something, or a new technique of generating a newspaper article, without having to spend like 3-4 hours to do research on an event, and to check all the facts, but
Mhm.
having a machine do it for you. So yes, you are right. We do that for with both goals in mind, of making life of people better, because human being for us is the center, is the value. But also we have to keep an eye on on shareholders, and balance sheet, and costs and income. That's
Of
something we
course,
have to come to terms with.
of course. Whoa, that's so. I'd really like to keep asking you questions, and I can think of a whole range, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So I'd really like to thank you so much, Luigi. Thanks, Luigi Ruggerone, head of Innovation Research and Development at Intesa San Paolo's Innovation Center. Thanks so much for your time, Luigi.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all those who will have a look at this at this program. Okay, thanks very
Yeah,
much. Thank you. Talk to you soon then.
yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to discovering the name of the statue.
Certain.
And
Okay, you'll see. You'll see.
and thanks to all
Bye
our
bye. Cheers. Bye. Ciao ciao.
and thanks to all our viewers for watching, and keep tuned with UCL's Changing Minds webinars.